When you start awakening, you realize that the world is actually insane. Awakening is basically just another word for becoming sane. One of the things that people who are awakening generally don't seem to realize, though, is that the world is insane on purpose. It's not an accident. The world has to be insane because it's all an illusion designed to extract energy from you. The insanity in the form of war, drama, politics, hate, and so on cause suffering, which basically powers the matrix. In the matrix, you appear to be a person with a name, a family, a job, and so on. But these are also illusions. You are actually consciousness, pure awareness, having a dream, or rather, a nightmare, that you are a person living in an insane world. Awareness is the ultimate reality, and it is essentially nothingness. So anything that has a form or any kind of appearance can't be real. This means that the world itself and the people in it are not real. So all the drama, violence, and so on are also not real. They are all illusions designed to make you, or rather the idea you as awareness has of yourself, suffer. The other is pure awareness appearing to take a human form, just like you. So the other is also you. The whole world is basically just a dream, but it is an induced dream. It's a dream being induced by complete psychopaths, and these psychopaths have been written about in ancient scriptures for thousands of years. This may all sound crazy, but once you understand that everything is pure awareness and that reality is an illusion, it all starts to make a lot more sense. However, while on one hand, everything is awareness and everybody is essentially an expression of awareness, because of the human condition and the way it's been for literally thousands of years, with a few people at the top dictating to everybody else on what to think, what to believe, and how to live, I genuinely don't think that humanity as a whole is meant to be free. Based on my research and observations of the human condition, it seems that humanity was essentially created as a slave race, and they've been slaves in one way or another ever since.
So, what we're going to look at here today is, why are most people so unconscious that they don't understand that? Okay? Why do they refuse to live in harmony with natural law? They refuse to understand natural law. Why are they so unconscious that they fail to recognize the rampant presence of evil in the modern day, in their midst, all around them, and they just ignore it? Why are they so unconscious that they will willfully participate in such evil, either directly or indirectly? Okay? And this is where my other presentations have left off. And I've been very tight-lipped about the things I'm going to talk about here today so far. Okay, because this has all been preparing the way for this understanding of the 6 years of work that I've been doing over the last 6 years. That's a long time to stay tight-lipped about something too. Okay, so I've termed the reasons why we're in this condition the tree of evil. Okay, that's what this right side of this slide represents. Okay, now you have to envision this model. At the top of the model, at the top of this tree of evil, there's all the leaves and the twigs. Okay, and these are the fruits. These are the expressions that happen after the fact. Okay, and the top expression is willful ignorance. People refusing to look into the truth for themselves, willfully staying ignorant. Okay? Now people will say, well, isn't that the root? Isn't that the root cause? No. That's the expression that follows the root cause. Well, what lies beneath that? What's the bigger branches of this tree of evil? Beneath willful ignorance People have a fundamental fear of owning their own personal responsibility. We don't want to be truly responsible for our own behavior. We want to pass the buck. We want to pass responsibility on to others and say, no, this isn't us doing this to ourselves. It isn't our responsibility. It's someone else's responsibility. Okay, so the fear of owning personal responsibility goes deeper in the psychological framework for why people are willfully ignorant. Now, something underlies that. There's a reason people have fear of owning their own personal responsibility. Okay, and that is what I would call the trunk of the tree of evil. The trunk of the tree is self-loathing. Humanity is a species that hates itself, ultimately. Deep, deep, deep down inside, nested into the deep underneath of the subconscious mind, we are a self-loathing species, okay? And that's due to a lack of self-respect. We don't have self-respect because we don't have enough understanding of self. We don't have self-knowledge. We don't have enough understanding of consciousness. Now, what we're going to talk about here today is what is the root of the tree of evil. Can anyone please tell me what general group of people this psychological framework is typical of? In general, there is a class of human beings that display just being ignorant, fearing to own their own personal responsibility, and lacking a lot of self-respect for themselves because they don't really know a lot about themselves yet. Children. Thank you, sir. Children. This exemplifies someone who is not psychologically mature, okay? Who has not psychologically and spiritually grown up, okay? So this is the group that we're really talking about. We're not talking about actual children. Again, we're talking about psychological children, spiritual children. People who have in some form or another been let down or completely abandoned by the parental figures in their lives. And I would suggest everybody in this room and everybody watching has abandonment issues in some form or fashion or another, whether they even want to admit it or not. On my podcast in the future, I'll be talking about my own abandonment issues because I had them. If you had them, you have them. And it means you're either dealing with them and you're healing them or you're not. Okay? And largely what this presentation is going to be about is those who are not dealing with them and not healing them. Okay? The questions that I'm going to explore in this presentation are as follows. Why are there so many ancient accounts of extraterrestrial visitation to our planet, all so similar in the events they describe, yet all of them are just readily dismissed by modern academia as merely fantasy and myth? And I'm going to suggest, no, they are not fantasy and myth, they are historical accounts. We just don't want to admit that they're historical accounts because of the implications that that would bring up for humanity. Okay? Are human beings actually the progeny of an extraterrestrial species that came forth to Earth, came to the Earth millennia ago, as some ancient historical accounts suggest? Were human beings created by extraterrestrial entities as a hybrid slave species for unknown purposes related to an alien agenda? Other questions to be explored. Did our extraterrestrial parents inadvertently create a host of genetic defects in the human genome in our species, including primary psychopathy as a direct result of the imprecise genetic modification techniques they employed? Did our extraterrestrial forebears provide to us our systems of government, money, and religion? And to what ends did they do so? What ends did they provide these systems to us for? What effect did our cosmic parents' quote-unquote disappearance have upon the collective human psyche? And how significant are all these events to understanding the current psychological conditions in which humanity currently exists? What does humanity need to understand to rectify the deeply seated psychological trauma that it has accumulated over millennia as a direct result of its, quote, troubled childhood? These are the questions to be explored. Part 1, the story of our past. Now, in researching this whole topic over the many years that I've done so, I've come across some excellent researchers. I'm going to talk about a lot of them later on. This is a guy who's a direct experiencer. Many people who are into the UFO phenomenon will know this guy. I've met him personally. I've spoken with him. I've been on a discussion panel with him. This guy is one of the greatest guys out there in the whole field of ufology. I personally believe his story, okay? And I just think he has incredible insight into the psychological issues behind the UFO phenomenon as well. His name is Travis Walton. People can check out his book, Fire in the Sky. In that book, he says this quote, "I have come to realize that the biggest problem anywhere in the world is that people's perceptions of reality are compulsively filtered through the screening mesh of what they want and do not want to be true, which is the worst way to research or look for the truth about anything." Okay? If I wanted this to be true, okay, I'd have to be pretty crazy. All right? I don't want what I'm about to come up here and tell you today to be true. I go wherever the truth or the research or the facts lead, and then adjust my perception accordingly, not the other way around. Trying to stuff the truth into your perceptions, good luck with that. Enjoy what you get on the other side of that. Because what you're going to get on the other side of that is no clarity, no understanding. Okay? You have to go where the truth leads, and you have to put aside your personal perceptions, this screening mesh, as Walton calls it, of what you want to be true. We're not the arbiters of truth, folks. The truth exists independently from us, and it is there for us to discover or to remain ignorant of. Keep that in mind as a theme going forward. All right? Another quote from the spiritualist Anthony DeMello, he said, "It is a great mystery that though the human heart longs for the truth, in which it alone finds liberation and delight, the first reaction of human beings to truth is one of hostility and fear." And I expect it to be no different. I expect to go into a long line of researchers who have been attacked and have had people just totally launch ad hominem attacks against them instead of looking into the information that they're talking about. Fine. I'll accept going on to that chopping block with great pride, because I'll join a host of characters that actually have character, okay? And I'll go into that group gladly, okay? So with that in mind, what we're actually going to be talking about here is occult information. How many people here expected today to be hearing about the occult coming to this meetup? Oh, great. So, okay, that surprises me, because that's good. More and more people, I think, are starting to understand what this is really about, that this is about the occult, and this is about occulted knowledge. But, you know, going into the derivation of words, the etymology of words, what occult actually means is it's derived from the Latin adjective occultus. Occultus means hidden, okay? Occultus, the Latin adjective, means hidden. And the Latin adjective occultus, in turn, comes from the Latin verb occultare. Occultare, as a verb, means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. So when we're talking about information that has been occulted, you know, when people hear the word occult, they think about stuff like this. And I'm not telling you that's not part of the occult, because it is, but we're really trying to get at the root meaning of the word, and the root meaning of the word is hidden. Occult means hidden knowledge. Knowledge that has been occulted has been hidden from other people's view for a reason, okay? And that reason is as follows. Such knowledge has been deliberately hidden in order to create and maintain a power differential between those who hold that knowledge and those who are ignorant of it. We've all heard the phrase, knowledge is power. Okay? Well, when a certain group of people have a lot of knowledge and they hide that or hold it back or dissuade other people from looking into that body of knowledge, that's creating a power differential between those two groups, between the knowledgeable and the ignorant. So you have to look at it as a hierarchical pyramid structure. Okay? At the top of the pyramid, there is knowledge being held by few people, and they're exploiting those at the bottom of that hierarchical structure or pyramid which lack that knowledge, the ignorant masses. Again, when I started doing research into all of these topics, you're going to realize hundreds of ancient accounts of what I'm about to get into today exist. And instead of going into all of the myriad of different quotes and different texts that I could bring up, and you know, we could talk about a couple of them, You have things like the Enuma Elish. You have things like the Vedas, the histories of the Dogon people, the Popol Vuh, the Sumerian cuneiform tablets, of course, the cylinder seals of the Sumerians, and the Akkadian texts, the Srimad Bhagavatam of the Indus tradition, the Mahabharata, the Book of Enoch, a huge text that deals with these topics, the histories of the Zulu tribe in Africa. Instead of going into specific accounts, what I'm going to do here today is to try to aggregate this information and tell a generalized, paraphrased account. Okay, up front, I'm explaining that's what I'm going to do. This is a generalized, paraphrased accounting of what I feel from all of these ancient texts actually occurred in the ancient past. Mainstream historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, and academia want to tell you all of these things are just the imagination of primitive peoples. Okay? What I'm trying to explain is that these are not tales being woven. Okay? These are historical accounts that are trying to be meticulously preserved as much as these people were capable of doing. They wouldn't have went through the enormity of trouble to write down and preserve these things if they were not histories. Okay? They're not myths. They're not fairy tales. They're not legends. They're what happened here in the ancient past. Okay? So with that in mind, let's get into this general paraphrased account, because that's all I have time to do. Okay? At some point in the ancient past, extraterrestrial beings, and again, you could think of it in whatever nature you want. I don't care if you think of it extra-dimensional, as interdimensional, as demonic, whatever nature you want to ascribe to this, they were non-human. They're not from the earth. So non-human, not from the earth, I'm just grouping that under the banner extraterrestrial, meaning from beyond the earth. Okay? Extraterrestrial beings, often described as gods, supernatural entities, giants or watchers, depending on what account you're reading, who the ancient Sumerians called the Anunnaki. That's the term I'm going to use for them in this presentation, because the Sumerian accounts of these beings are probably the best known. Okay? And that term, Anunnaki, means those who came to earth from the heavens. That's what the word means. Now, why would they even have a word that meant those who came to the earth from the heavens? Okay? If they weren't dealing with actual beings. Okay? That happened. So they arrived on the earth in the distant past. Their primary mission, according to some of these texts and according to certain scholars who have studied them, was to obtain gold for purposes which we don't fully understand. I'm also not going to get into that argument here today in this lecture. Some people say it was to repair their atmosphere. I feel, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, gold has properties that we don't really fully understand. We don't really even know what it is. Okay? This mission to obtain this gold was led by two brothers in these accounts. In the Sumerian accounts, they were named Enki and Enlil. They were sons, they were royalty, they were sons of the Sumerian king on their home world, and his name was Anu, A-N-U. After their arrival, these beings started putting many of their own people to work in mining excavations in the area of the world that we now call Southern Africa, Southeastern Africa specifically, a region which they called the Abzu. Abzu in Sumerian means the deep. Now, people will say that that meant spiritual waters. I'm suggesting that it actually meant under the earth or somewhere deep underneath something in the underground, like a mine, like a subterranean mine or cavern. Okay? After realizing that they did not have enough manual laborers on this mission to obtain the quantities of gold they required, their leader, Enki, devised a plan to create a slave species by genetically modifying an existing hominid species that was indigenous to the earth. The Anunnaki would use these new slave species to do their gold mining work for them. In this cylinder seal, you see Enki here, who is depicted as the Lord of the Waters. He was also called the God of Earth. Ki is the name for earth in their tradition, in the Sumerian tradition. Enki means God of Earth. Okay? So he was also the God of the waters, or the seas. Okay? And here you see this area here represents the Abzu. Okay? And you see another Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are going to be depicted by these conical hats that they're always depicted wearing. We'll look into that later. Okay? And you see one of the workers here in the Absu. All right? This plan is summarized in the following exchange between the two brothers. Enki says, the beings we need already exist. They live in the Abzu and walk erect on two legs. My son, Ningizida, has tested their DNA, which they called the life essence, and it is similar to ours. We can combine our DNA or life essence with theirs to create primitive workers who are intelligent enough to understand our commands and handle our tools, and they will do the mining work for us, and relief will come to our people. Enlil answered to his brother, slavery was abolished long ago on our planet. Tools are our slaves, not other beings. You are suggesting creating a new species which did not previously exist. Such creative power belongs to God alone. Modern religion, I think, is a holdover from the days when these gods put certain human beings into positions of power and created priest classes so that they could control the overall populations more effectively. And who did they ask them to worship as their gods? They asked them to worship these extraterrestrial beings. Because if you did what they wanted, they would bestow favors upon you. And you would get a little bit more food, or a little bit more blankets, or a little bit better housing. Okay? If you just did their bidding and didn't ask questions and went along with everything they asked you to do like a good little slave. Okay? And, you know, I'm going to take a lot of pot shots at people in this presentation. I don't care who it offends. I don't care if it offends you in the room. I don't care if it offends whoever's watching. I'm going to get scathing toward few groups of people in the world who I think are keeping the dynamic of human slavery in place. And religionists are one of them, particularly priest classes. Okay? Because where are these people talking about the police state that's running rampant in our culture? Where are these people talking about the wrongness of slavery that's running rampant in our culture? Okay? Where are they? No, they won't talk about that. You know, they just want you in their churches and synagogues and mosques to throw as much money into their system as they can. And they're not going to talk out against Big Daddy government. Not a bit. Because then they lose their 501c3 statuses, you know? And then people come after them for the taxes like they do everybody else. Okay? So these aren't holy men. They're nothing of the kind. Nothing of the kind. The people who are doing the real great work to warn humanity about the slavery that's ongoing and needs to end are the holy men of this world. Not these people. Not a bit. Okay? And I mean, if you can't see the similarity, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you if you can't see it. Could it be any more clear that they're trying to emulate the gods? You know? You know, that speaks for itself. If I need to say anything there, something's really wrong. This is where the mystery tradition, mystery schools, and secret societies of the modern day come from. Because the gods created these temples of knowledge, centers of knowledge that they gave some knowledge to few people in order to control the masses of people. A hierarchical structure based on occulted information, occulted knowledge. Okay? So this is where modern secret societies come out of the ancient world to us from. And then, of course, from there, you get the dark occult. You get Satanism and dark Luciferianism and the Order of Death and the Bohemian Club, etc. The dark variant of the Illuminati, if you will. Okay? Which means illuminated ones. They're nothing of the kind illuminated. They're frauds and fakes. The real illuminated people are the people who are trying to tell people the truth about what's going on this planet because they have that knowledge. And they're trying to share it with people. They're the illuminators, those who bring that light to other people. So calling these clowns the illuminated ones is a misnomer. All right? But, you know, they're Satanists most certainly. All right? And that's where these groups come out of. Again, coming out of knowledge being held and preserved for the few in the ancient world to control, and then they come forward through into the modern world as these different dark orders.
Considering this, and also how most people don't actually want to be free in the real sense, I get the sense that humanity, collectively, wasn't meant to be free. And historically, it's always been a few individuals here and there who become awake, and the society as a whole has always been against them. Why would this be the case if humanity was meant to be free collectively? Another reason I think humanity isn't meant to be free as a whole is because it's now 2025, and most people still haven't realized something so simple as that voting is a puppet show. And it's essentially voting for who you want to represent the people enslaving you. Now, I realized that voting was just a puppet show, and so was politics, when I was like 17. And yet, there are people in their 50s who still don't realize this. Why is that? Well, I think it's because humanity as a whole isn't meant to be free. I mean, in Australia, you even get fined for not voting.
This means that if you are enrolled to vote, then you must vote in all federal, state and local council elections. What happens if you don't vote in a state or local council election? First, you will get an apparent failure to vote notice from the Victorian Electoral Commission. This is your opportunity to explain why you didn't vote. It is not a fine, but it's important to reply to it. You will have 28 days to respond to this notice. If you ignore it, or if your excuse for failing to vote is not accepted, you will get an infringement notice.
And the people never wonder why they would have to pay money for having enough intelligence to not vote. On top of all this, basically half the population, women, have been conditioned to want to be led by whatever men they're in a relationship with in some way, shape, or form. And none of them ever stop to consider the fact that they're okay with being led by men who are also being led by other men who are enslaving them, called the government. The whole thing is a joke. Also, most people haven't even seen through religion, which should be one of the simplest things for anybody with a functioning brain to see. They don't understand that major religions were created to enslave them. And all these idiots keep reproducing and creating more slaves for the psychopaths that are controlling the world. Not just that, but the religious ones also poison their own children with their religious nonsense. So considering all this, it's very obvious to me that most humans weren't meant to be free, and the world is insane on purpose, which makes sense since the vast majority of people are actually non-player characters. And if you've ever played video games, of what use is freedom to a non-player character? They would actually much rather not be free and just follow their programming. And this is what most people do. And it's also why the world is insane, because the insanity also gets expressed through the people in the Matrix. For example, the insanity of slavery couldn't have happened if it was just a few people at the top wanting to enslave a particular group of people. It could only go on for 300 plus years because the people at the top managed to program the other non-player characters into believing that slavery was legitimate. And on top of all this, while slavery seems to have been abolished on the surface, in reality, it wasn't, because people are still slaves. Except now they're actually in a worse position because they think they're free, even though they're clearly not. You know, when they get paid from their jobs, they have to give a percentage of that to the people at the top who couldn't care less about them. And what do these people use that money for? To fund wars and to build a prison around the people who are funding them. It's absurd, but it makes perfect sense because the world is an insane asylum and it's meant to be like that.